Okay, I have to be honest with you. Looking at this stack of papers sitting between us right now, I don't even know where to begin. It feels like we're looking at 10 years of news crammed into a single calendar year.
It certainly feels that way. It is January 24th, 2026. We are exactly 1 year, 365 days into the second term of Donald Trump. And the administration has just released this massive document titled 365 Wins in 365 Days.
It looks less like a press release and more like a phone book. Remember phone books?
Mm.
But seriously, the administration is calling this the most accomplished first year in modern history. And look, regardless of how anyone voted, you can't really argue with the sheer volume of activity here. But our job today isn't to take a victory lap and it's not to throw stones. I want to know what's actually in this thing.
Exactly. We need to strip away the rallies, the slogans, all of that, and look at the mechanics. Because when you read the fine print, and I have read all the fine print, you realize this isn't just a list of policies. It is a fundamental restructuring of how the American government functions. We need to figure out what's real, what's just symbolic theater, and what is actually helping or hurting the families listening to this right now.
So let's get into it. I'm seeing everything on this list from tiny cars to space lasers to massive changes in your bank account. Where do we even start?
We have to start with the money, the wallet issues, because there's a very strong narrative running through this document of Main Street versus Wall Street. And the biggest, flashiest headline is this executive order regarding housing.
Right, the one with the very subtle title, Stopping Wall Street from Competing with Main Street.
I've seen the headlines. The claim is that the president is banning big hedge funds from buying houses, right? Which, as someone who has tried to buy a house recently, sounds incredible. You aren't bidding against a multi-billion-dollar corporation. That is the claim. The idea is to stop the BlackRocks and Vanguards of the world from snapping up starter homes, ostensibly so regular families can buy them and, build wealth. It sounds like a pure populist win. But we have to look at the machinery of how this actually works.
Okay, so what's the catch? Is it too good to be true?
Well, there's a massive gray area. The executive order directs the Treasury Secretary to define exactly what a large institutional investor is, and they have 30 days to do it. That definition isn't written yet. So if the Treasury decides that large means, say, owning 50,000 homes, then a company owning 49,000 homes is essentially off the hook. The effectiveness of this entire ban hinges on a definition that just hasn't been written.
So it could end up being a sieve. But let me play devil's advocate for a second. Let's say I already own a home and I want to sell it. Don't I want BlackRock to come in and offer me
And that's the other side of it, exactly.
20% over asking price? Doesn't banning them actually hurt my property value?
That is the sharp, double-edged sword here. If you're a current homeowner looking to cash out, yes, this potentially lowers the ceiling on what you can sell for. You've removed the richest buyers from the pool. But if you're what we call the learner persona, a young family trying to get into the market, this is designed to help you. And there is one specific mechanism here that's fascinating. It's called the first look policy.
First look. What does that mean?
Usually, when homes are foreclosed on by the government, they're packaged in bulk thousands at a time and sold to hedge funds before they ever hit a public listing site. This policy changes that. It forces these government-held properties to be listed individually for 30 days, available only to individual buyers before a corporation can touch them.
Oh, wow. So it effectively breaks that bulk buying pipeline.
Exactly. It forces the inventory onto the open market for regular people first. That is a tangible, mechanical change that hurts Wall Street portfolios and helps the middle class.
Speaking of helping the working class, this tax section feels very, very targeted. We've got no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, and no tax on Social Security.
This is significant because it's not the traditional trickle-down corporate tax cut we usually see from Republicans. This is cash in pocket for service workers, for blue-collar workers pulling double shifts, and seniors. It's immediate liquidity.
But the one that really stopped me in my tracks was the credit cards. The president is asking Congress to cap credit card interest rates at 10%. I had to double-check that I wasn't reading a Bernie Sanders proposal. Republicans are usually the party of the banks, aren't they?
Historically, yes. Traditionally, a conservative administration would protect the banking sector's right to set their own risk and rates. But the source material here notes that credit card profit margins are currently hovering over 50%. This proposal is a direct attack on those banking profits to benefit the consumer. It signals a major shift. This administration is choosing the borrower over the lender.
That is a wild pivot. And then you have these Trump accounts for babies. This sounds like science fiction to me. Explain the math here. How does a baby get $300,000?
This is the baby bond concept. The proposal is that the government sets up a tax-advantaged savings account for every newborn citizen. It's funded by tariffs and private donations from billionaires. Michael Dell and the SoFi guys are mentioned.
Okay, but $300,000. That's a lot of money.
Well, that's the projection for when the child turns 18. It relies on the magic of compound interest. If you put a chunk of capital in a high-yield account at birth and don't touch it for 18 years, it grows. The idea is to turn every American child into a mini capitalist.
But isn't that risky? I mean, what if the market crashes when little Timmy turns 17?
Precisely. It's contingent on market performance and, crucially, on tariff revenue staying high. If those tariffs dry up, the funding dries up. So it's a massive promise of wealth transfer, but it's tied to the volatility of the stock market.
Okay, so that's the economy. Protectionism for your wallet. Now let's talk about protectionism for the country. The document claims the largest homicide drop on record and says murder rates are down to levels we haven't seen since 1900. But the biggest story here is immigration. Negative net migration for the first time in 50 years.
The numbers are staggering. 2.6 million people removed and another 2 million self-deported because the incentives to stay are gone. But as always, we have to look at how they did it because the mechanics here are, well, they're historic. The administration has invoked the Alien Enemies Act.
I feel like I remember that from high school history class. Isn't that from, like, the 1700s?
1798, to be exact. Signed by John Adams, it was designed for wartime. It allows the president to summarily deport foreign nationals from a hostile country without standard due process.
And we're using a law from 1798 today. Who are we at war with?
They're using it specifically against gang members, like Tren de Aragua.
Hang on, clarify that for people who might not know. Tren de Aragua.
Right, sorry. Tren de Aragua is a transnational criminal organization that originated in Venezuela. They've expanded rapidly into U.S. cities over the last few years, known for being particularly violent. The administration is classifying them essentially as a hostile invading force. By using the Alien Enemies Act, they can bypass the immigration courts entirely. No hearings, no backlog, just gone.
So it's efficient, but is it legal?
It's incredibly efficient, but it sets a massive precedent. You're using a wartime power to fight crime. But that pales in comparison to Executive Order 51. This is the one that keeps constitutional scholars up at night.
Ending birthright citizenship for children of illegal immigrants. I thought the Constitution was clear on this. If you're born here, you're an American. Can a president just change that with a signature?
Most legal scholars would say absolutely not. The 14th Amendment states that all persons born or naturalized in the United States are citizens. It's been the law of the land for over a century. But this executive order, it challenges that interpretation. The administration is arguing that if the parents are here illegally, they aren't subject to the jurisdiction of the U.S., and therefore the amendment doesn't apply.
That sounds like a lawyer's loophole.
It is a massive legal gamble. By signing this EO, the president is effectively trying to override the text of the Constitution. It forces a Supreme Court battle. But in the meantime, it creates chaos. Imagine being born in a hospital tomorrow and not being issued a birth certificate because of your parent's status. It challenges the very definition of who gets to be an American.
And it's not just about who is born here. It's about people who are already citizens. I saw a note about denaturalization. They're auditing Somali immigration cases.
Yes, specifically citing fraud in the Minnesota Somali community. The intent is to strip citizenship from people who they claim lied on their applications years ago. When you combine that with revoking visas for pro-Hamas agitators on college campuses, you start to see a pattern.
It feels like a two-tiered system.
That's a good way to put it. The administration argues this is about safety and national security, and they point to the crime stats as proof that it works. But the cost is the creation of a system where citizenship feels revocable. It's a trade-off. Lower crime and closed borders, in exchange for a much more aggressive, exclusionary definition of civil liberties.
Let's shift gears to the machinery of the government itself, because if you work in D.C., your life is probably turned upside down. There's a section here called Dismantling the State, and they're officially closing the Department of Education.
Officially beginning the process to transfer all authority back to the states.
People have been threatening to do that for 40 years. Is this actually happening, or is it just symbolism?
It is more than symbolism because of the money. We are talking about disrupting $3 trillion in historic spending. This isn't just about curriculum, it's about funding for special needs students, Pell Grants, Title I funding for poor districts. If that federal spigot turns off or gets block granted to states, the impact is huge.
And there's a huge culture war component here, too.
Huge. They're cutting funding to any school with DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion policies, and they're rewriting Title IX.
Remind us what Title IX covers.
Title IX is the federal law that prohibits sex discrimination in education. It's the reason girls' sports teams have equal funding. The administration is redefining sex in Title IX to mean only two biological sexes.
So that effectively bans transgender students from using bathrooms or playing on teams that align with their gender identity.
Exactly. And combined with the executive order barring COVID vaccine mandates in schools, you see the strategy. For a parent who is anti-woke, this restores their dignity and parental rights. But for a transgender student, the federal safety net that protected their civil rights is essentially being pulled up.
And it's not just the schools. The deep state purge is, well, the numbers are wild. 270,000 bureaucrats removed. That's the population of a decent-sized city.
It's the largest reduction in the federal workforce since the demobilization after World War II. They've implemented a 1-in, 4-out rule. For every 4 people that leave, only 1 can be hired.
I have to say, the return to office mandate, forcing federal workers back to their desks 5 days a week, is kind of relatable. My boss did the same thing.
It is relatable, but in the context of government, it was used as a tool for attrition. If you live in Virginia and don't want to commute 2 hours into D.C. every day, you quit, and if you quit, your job vanishes. But the most striking part is the security clearances.
Yeah, I saw the list. Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, Liz Cheney.
Revoking security clearances for former presidents and vice presidents is unheard of. Usually you keep them in the loop for continuity and advice. Doing this consolidates all power in the current executive branch. It removes the old guard. It makes the government very efficient because there's no one left to say, wait, we usually do it this way.
Okay, let's take a breath. We've done the heavy stuff. Let's talk about something that's weirdly fascinating to me. Health, culture, and tiny cars.
The tiny cars are actually a really important piece of the economic puzzle.
I love the tiny cars. The document says they're repealing regulations to allow for the production of tiny cars and ending this stop-start requirement.
You know that feature where your engine shuts off at a red light to save a thimble of gas?
And the air conditioning turns off and it drives me crazy.
It's gone. But the tiny car deregulation is significant. It allows manufacturers to build smaller, simpler vehicles that don't meet the current extremely expensive safety and emission standards. It effectively allows for a $10,000 or $12,000 new car to exist again.
Which, for a lot of people, is the difference between having a job and not having a job.
Exactly. It's deregulation that you can actually drive. And it pairs with MAA, Make America Healthy Again.
This is such a weird mix of policies. On one hand, it sounds like a whole food shopper's dream, phasing out artificial food dyes. Walmart and Nestle are actually doing it.
They are. They're bringing whole milk back to schools. They stopped Beagle experiments at the NIH. It's a move away from big pharma toward real food.
Which sounds great. Who doesn't want less red dye number 40 in their kids' cereal?
Right. But the flip side is the vaccine skepticism. They've reduced the recommended childhood vaccine schedule from 72 shots down to just 11 consensus vaccines.
That is a massive change in public health policy.
It completely dismantles the established medical consensus. So the trade-off is you get cleaner food, but you lose the herd immunity protections that the CDC has built over decades. It's a populist approach to health. Trust the farm, not the pharmacy.
And we can't ignore the symbolism. Renaming Fort Liberty back to Fort Bragg, and a new holiday, National Day of Patriotic Devotion.
That replaces the traditional Inauguration Day rhetoric. It's about enforcing a specific type of loyalty. And the executive order mandating classical architecture for federal buildings, no more modern, brutalist concrete blocks. They want pillars. They want Rome. It's theater, sure, but it sends a very strong message about returning to a traditional American identity.
Okay, finally, we have to look abroad. Because while all this is happening at home, the foreign policy approach is, well, it's unique. The Board of Peace.
This is the Gaza plan, and you have to understand this doesn't look like a diplomatic summit. It looks like a corporate board meeting.
The document lists the board members. Donald Trump is chairman, Jared Kushner, Tony Blair, and a bunch of business leaders.
It's treating nation building like a distressed asset turnaround. They're bringing in technocrats. Dr. Ali Shah is mentioned as the lead administrator, not politicians.
It feels like a business deal. We will build you an economy, but you play by our rules.
Precisely. The goal is dignity through economic prosperity. The theory is that if people are making money and have jobs, they won't fight. They're bypassing the political grievances that have stalled peace talks for 50 years and just saying, let's build hotels and factories.
But is that realistic? Can you just buy peace?
That is the trillion-dollar question. It risks ignoring the deep-seated political and emotional drivers of the conflict. It assumes everyone is a rational economic actor. But frankly, the administration would argue that the old way of endless peace talks in Geneva hotels hasn't worked for decades. So they're trying a hostile takeover approach.
So we have covered the economy, the border, the bureaucracy, the culture in the world.
Yeah.
When you step back and look at this 365 wins document as a whole,
Yeah.
what are we really seeing?
If we synthesize all of this, we are seeing the emergence of a very specific Trump 2.0 doctrine. It's different from the first term. It's more organized. First, it is economically populist. It attacks Wall Street and banking profits to put cash in the pockets of workers. That is a major departure from traditional republicanism. Second, it is culturally aggressive. It uses the full power of the state to enforce a specific definition of American identity, from the architecture of buildings to the gender policies in schools. And third, and most importantly, it is constitutionally risky.
Because of the executive orders.
Because it relies on bypassing the legislative branch entirely, ending birthright citizenship, firing civil servants, impounding funds. These are things that traditionally require laws or amendments. This administration is doing them by fiat.
And their argument, I assume, is look at the scoreboard.
Exactly. They are pointing to the document and saying, safety and results. Murder rates are down. Inflation is down. The border is closed. They are telling the American people, we broke the norms, we bypassed the bureaucracy, we ignored the lawyers, and your life is safer and cheaper because of it.
And for a lot of people, that is a very compelling argument. I don't care how the sausage is made, I just want cheaper eggs and safe streets.
That is the appeal. We're seeing a government that is undeniably efficient. It's moving at breakneck speed because it has removed the brakes.
But here's the question we have to leave you with, and it's the one that keeps coming up as I look at this stack of paper.
Right. The bureaucracy, the courts, the slow legislative process, those are the guardrails. They're designed to be inefficient to prevent tyranny. When you remove those guardrails to get fast results, what happens when that efficient machine is turned in a direction you don't agree with?
What happens when the person driving the machine isn't someone you voted for?
Exactly. Efficiency is great until it's used against you. It's something to think about as we watch year 2 unfold. Thanks for listening.